Aces in Armor is an epic strategy game set in the Second World War, where US and Soviet forces fight Germany. This is how to play it. Sit around the table so that two allied players are not sitting next to each other. Each player places their unit mat in front of them. If you are playing for the first time, we recommend you familiarize yourself with the different unit types first. Find the according miniature for each of the 6 sections on your unit map. The units are categorized into 4 arms: infantry, tank, artillery, aircraft. At the start of the game, hand out 3 start tokens upside down to each player. Each player takes his 6 units and divides them as he wishes into 3 groups on these start tokens. That will define the 3 armies you are starting with. Then it is time to place the armies on the map. Note that the tokens are turned upside down so you don't know where your armies will end up. Roll a die to determine which placer can place their units first. Then go clockwise. The starting player turns over one of his tokens and finds the corresponding number on the game board. The player then places their first army there. He must put 1 unit in the middle on the number and the rest of the units in adjacent hexes around it. Then go clockwise and the next player does the same. The game board should look something like this now, and we can start the actual game. Roll a die again to determine the starting player, then go clockwise. Now the first turn starts. Each turn consists of 4 different phases, which is also indicated on the quick reference sheet on the back of the rulebook. Each player plays these 4 phases, and then it's the next player's turn, and that player plays the 4 phases. Let's look at the move phase first. In the move phase, the player can move all his units he wants. How far a unit can move depends on its speed and the terrain the unit is moving to. The speed of the unit is indicated on the unit map. This tank has 4 movement points. Different types of terrain consume a different amount of movement points. Standard terrain consumes 1 movement point per hex. Roads only half a movement point. Forests 1.5 movement points. To move into a water field or conquer an enemy or neutral factory takes the full turn. Entering an owned factory costs 1 movement point. Let's see how this works. This tank has 4 movement points. I'll go on a forest first, which takes 1.5 movement points. On a road, an additional half movement point, so we are at 2. 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. This infantry has 2 movement points. I'll move 1/2. And I decide to stop here, because I want to conquer the factory next turn, and this will take the full movement turn of the infantry. When a unit moves to a hex adjacent to an enemy unit, that enemy unit can choose to intercept your unit. The intercepting player puts the arrow marker between the units, and the intercepted unit must stop moving. In the next turn of the intercepting player, his unit cannot move and must attack the intercepted unit. Then remove the marker. Infantry can occupy neutral or enemy factories. To conquer a factory, an infantry unit just needs to move on the factory hex. This will cost them their full movement turn. That means the infantry must already be waiting at an adjacent field. When you conquer a factory, mark the factory with one of your flagships. It is now yours even after your infantry leaves the factory hex. Be aware, your enemy can also conquer your factories. Once an infantry moves on the factory hex, all enemy units in the factory are immediately destroyed. This means you cannot defend a factory from within. Instead, you must stop enemies from reaching your factory. The next phase is to name attacks. Simply tell your opponent who is attacking whom in sequence. Units can attack opponent units within their range as indicated on the unit chart. The howitzer, for example, can attack units that are between 2 and 5 hexes away. Name your attacks like this. The howitzer attacks the German tank. Then the infantry attacks it. Note that the aircraft can only be attacked by other aircraft, anti-aircraft, and certain types of infantry. This is indicated on the unit mat with a cloud symbol. The next phase is the combat phase. All units named in the previous phase will now attack. Let's start with this howitzer. First, determine the number of dice you may roll based on the amount damage the unit has. This howitzer has no damage, so I may roll all 12 dice. Now we check which of the dice landed a hit. This depends on the strength of the unit that is printed on the unit mat. The howitzer has a strength of 5. That means it will hit with each die showing a 5 or less. Let's count the hits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's see how these hits translate into damage to the tank. It has strong armor, so the 5 hits only cause 2 damage. It would have required 7 hits to cause 3 damage. If the attack tank was in a forest, it would even require 9 hits to cause 3 damage. Put 2 gray damage markers on the tank. This howitzer gets 1 combat experience because it has damaged an enemy unit. Now to the next combat. The infantry also attacks the tank. Because the fighting units are in adjacent hexes, this is considered a close combat, which means the defender can fire back. Again, let's determine the number of dice depending on the damage. The tank has 2 damage, so it may roll 10 dice. The infantry has 3 damage already, so it may roll 8 dice. The infantry already has 3 combat experience. Normally, it would only hit on a 2 or less, but due to its combat experience, it hits on a 4 or less. The tank also hits on each dice with a 6 or less. Let's roll the dice. To speed up the game, attacker and defender should roll their dice at the same time. Don't worry about the red dice for now, we will explain this later. That is 1, 2, 3 hits from the infantry. Bad luck. The tank lands 5 hits. Let's read the table again. The 3 hits from the infantry cause 1 damage on the tank. The 5 hits from the tank deal 3 damage to the infantry. Since the infantry received their 6 damage, it is destroyed and removed from the board. The tank gets 2 experience points since it has destroyed an enemy unit. With every 2 experience points, units level up. The tank has just earned its first yellow bead and now has veteran status. One more thing. If you combine arms in your attack, you will get extra bonus dice. Remember that there are 4 unit arms: infantry, tank, artillery, and aircraft. If you attack a unit in an adjacent hex, you get 1 extra red dice for each of your unit arms which have your target in their attack range. Let's look at our example from before again. When the infantry attacked the tank, an artillery unit and an aircraft unit had the tank in their attack range. Therefore, the infantry got 3 additional red dice to attack. If you attack an aircraft, you get 2 extra red dice if there is another of your aircraft adjacent to the attack target. If there are 2 or more of your aircraft adjacent, you even get 3 red bonus dice. After all combats for this round are done, the next phase begins. Collect 1 coin for each of your factories. You can now repair units in your factories. Put 2 coins under a unit in your factory to initiate the repair. At the beginning of your next turn, remove the 2 coins and up to 3 damage from your unit. Finally, new units can be purchased. Pay the purchase price and place the new unit in any one of your empty factories. Now the player's turn is completed, and the next players take turns, one after another, in a clockwise direction. The team that first occupies 6 factories wins the game. One more note, don't bother if you are playing for the first time, but for experienced players, please note there is a rule in the rulebook to limit the advantage of the starting player in the very first turn. Now you are ready for your first game of Aces in Armor. Thanks for watching and enjoy the game.